Call hello, Yahawashi, Yahawashi, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well over the flock. Shalom and salutation to you brothers out here teaching the truth across the four corners of the globe to all the scattered and lost tribes of Israel. Shalom to all the Akim and Akwab listening across the world, across the globe. Shalom. Now this week is very important week for all the believers of Yahawashi Yahawashi and Bahashem Rakakwadash, in which we celebrate the Passover, which is an ancient custom of ours, right? An ancient law and ordinance of ours, going all the way back into. I'm gonna get into a little bit of what the Passover means in a minute, which is the topic of this video. But real quick, I just wanted to state how it's pretty much kept. Looking at this calendar here, March 2022, in the States. And you can see here the day highlighted is today, the 16th. So at even, today is when the Passover is ceremony begins. The Passover ceremony, the Pesach, is the first day of an entire week of uh, of a high holy day. It's the first high holy day of the entire week, which is I guess you would call it a high holy week. You know, because from the 16th at even, which is Wednesday today, March 16th, we begins the ceremony of the Pesach, going into the Hebrew Bible, right? Story from Exodus during the time of we're gonna get into that, but just so you can see, from Wednesday sundown to Thursday sundown is the Pesach. All right, is the Passover. All right, now the entire week from starting at today sundown, all the way until the 24th at even, constitute the feast of unleavened bread. All right. So now let's get into a little of what exactly is going on here. All right, so I got certain things pulled up. Now, if you pull up Passover on Google, you're going to see that Passover, according to uh, how the Jewish so-called Jews over there in Israel keep it, they're going to keep it on April 15th, and it ends on the 23rd. So they're including the entire week there. We're keeping it right here on the 16th, and it ends on the 24th. Okay. um, Showing you we doing things a little different than how they doing it. Okay. Passover is celebrated for. These are just some notes. Passover, Hebrew Pesach, and Judaism holiday commemorating the Hebrews' liberation from slavery in Egypt and the passing over of the forces of destruction, or the sparing of the firstborn of the Israelites when the Lord smote the land of Egypt on the eve of the Exodus. Okay, so it started on the eve from the time of starting in Egypt. It began in Egypt, and it started at eve when the Lord began to send, all right, the spirit of death over the firstborns of all the firstborns, cattle, of livestock, and of people, sparing the firstborn of the Israelites. Right? Let's keep reading. It says, let's see here. So, what happens during the 7 days of Passover? It says in Israel, Passover is the 7-day holiday or of the feast of unleavened bread. Why? Because you don't put any leaven in your bread, based on how we kept it in the ancient world when we were fleeing Egypt. Leaven takes a period of time for the cakes to rise, and so we didn't have that time, so we made sure our bread was unleavened. It says with the first and last days celebrated as legal holidays and as holy days involving holiday meals, special prayer services, as abstention from work. Because as you can see here, my point was that for showing this calendar was the Sabbath comes in tonight at even, and the Sabbath will also end the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the 23rd at even. All right, the next Sabbath begins from 23rd at even to the 24th at even. So the 16th to the 17th is a Sabbath, the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the 23rd to the 24th at even is the last Sabbath of the end of that Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it begins with a Sabbath and it ends with a Sabbath. The rest of the week in between, like, from 17th at sundown all the way to the 23rd at sundown, is just a week as you would carry on regular. You all right? You can have sex during that week. You can enjoy yourself during that week. The only thing you cannot do, as per the law, is eat leaven, eat yeast. All right, and there's many different forms of yeast. I suggest you do a Google search on what the different names of yeast is called, or what foods don't contain yeast, so that you can keep it properly. But it is not Sabbath days in between. This whole week, other than the first and the last day, are not Sabbath days. So you can have sex, Um, the Passover is a memorial of the redemption of the Exodus from Egypt and the rejoicing of Yahweh's salvation. So it is commemorating. It was a ceremony to commemorate and celebrate the time in which the Lord passed over um, the Israelite children, the firstborn, and didn't destroy them. And in the meantime, destroyed the rest of the firstborns in Egypt. It says, in order to protect their firstborn children, the Israelites marked their doors with lamb's blood, so the angel of death would pass over them. Thus the name Passover, which is Pesach in the Hebrew. The Israelites were ultimately freed from slavery and wandered the desert for 40 years before making it to the promised land. What does the Bible say about Passover? The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, these are the regulations for the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it. That's another reason why you got to know who's coming to your Passover. It's not going to be no open door event. Anybody just come up and show up, because in accordance with the law, foreigners aren't supposed to be eating of it. These is Israelite foreigners, by the way. Salakin, other nations, heathen nations, by the way, because Israelites would come from different lands to come and keep the Passover. That's what the Lord did. It says, but a temporary resident and a hired worker may not eat of it. It must be eaten inside one house. Taken none of the meat outside the house. Don't break any of the bones. All right. So the Passover angel of death is what we're talking about. Now that's how we kept the Passover. That's the origins of the Passover. Now I'm gonna read the scripture. It says, this is Acts 11:26 through 28. And when he had found him, he brought him in unto Antioch. And it came to pass that whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. And in these days came prophets from Jerusalem unto Antioch. So the disciples who believed in Yahawashi during the time of the Acts, um, after Yahawashi's death, of course, and resurrection, the disciples were called Christians first there. All right, so now fast forward into now, the Pesach is called. It's referenced as Easter, right? Well, you got to know the difference here. Is it that we're celebrating Easter? Is that we're celebrating Passover? Is it the same thing? What is it? Is it on the 15th? What is it? Well, Great Millstone, all of that confusion, when you follow in one camp, you get all of that confusion out of you. You get some answers. So I like what this article is saying. Just looking up and doing some research, it says Easter is the most important festival in the Christian calendar. So Christianity today is not Christianity as it was first preached, by the way. So Easter, even though that word is in the Bible, when you do a biblical search of that word and you see the Greek, it's Pesach, meaning Passover. So it's one and the same, meaning it's in the same time frame. Now, so-called Jews, they call Seder the day in which is the Passover, like that ceremony that is held. That's called Seder to the so-called Jews. So you'll see that word too. It says, which celebrates the resurrection of Yahawashi from the dead after he was publicly crucified. Passover is a festival celebrated by the Jews all over the world. So once again, because there was a difference, even in the time of the Lord, there was the believers on Yahweh Yahushua, and then there was the believers on just the Father, Yahweh. See, Yahushua made intercession before Israelites so that they can be turned back to the Lord when the Lord turns back on us. He is that mediator. And without him, you have no way to get to, um through the Son, you get to the Father. Now, modern day Christians believe that, but modern day Jews and the so-called Jews in the land of Israel, they don't believe that. Neither did the true Jews of the Bible who are Israelites. They didn't believe on, many of them didn't believe on Yahushua either. So you got to understand, even though the salvation through his Son, through a Savior, was always prophesied of since the Old Testament, certain Jews just did not believe in the Yahushua, and some believed in Yahushua, but not in the resurrection. So you gotta understand, see the differences, and these differences came many years ago. Is Passover a Jewish holiday or a Christian holiday? Passover, also called Pesach, is a major Jewish holiday that celebrates the exodus of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. So once again, it started out as a um, a day, a holy day in which we would celebrate the exodus from Egypt, right? We would celebrate the Passover of, the angel of death passing over the firstborn of Israelites and slaughtering the firstborn of the Egyptians. So fast forward to when you after Yahushua, the his how he kept it, and how we keep it since then. If you in the faith, man, if you believe on Yahushua. This says Jesus, yeah, Jesus. Yahweh is portrayed as the Passover lamb in the New Testament. So now things get different. This is when things first changed. This is how the separation began between when they was calling Jews Christians in Antioch, and then they was calling to this day how we can be Israelites, but we believe in Yahweh. We believe in the Messiah who came during this time. Uh, through the gospel, he came, and he is the Passover lamb. We believe in that. This is what separates us from certain camps that don't believe, non-Messianic camps. They don't believe in the New Testament. They keep the Passover, but they keep it as the traditions before Yahushua. We keep the Passover, but we remember the traditions before Yahushua, but we also understand how Yahushua changed the meaning of the Passover in basically allowed it to represent himself. So it says here, Yahushua is portrayed as the Passover lamb in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul wrote. So now that lamb that we would it started out as there was a commandment from the Lord to slaughter a lamb and put the blood on the doorpost so that the angel of death would pass over you, and the lamb was sacrificed so that we can be delivered from the angel of death. Well, Yahushua became that Passover lamb so that we can be delivered in times to come. You see, it all comes down to the time we are now in times. So he had to be crucified for this purpose, and we keep the Passover in remembrance of the first Passover, and in remembrance, more importantly, of Yahushua being the Passover lamb. So we put the focus during the Pesach on Yahushua, all right? But we do remember Egypt. First of all, more importantly, Yahushua was that spirit of death that passed over Israelites in Egypt during the first Exodus. It says the Apostle Paul wrote for Yahushua or Hamashiach, It says the Messiah, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. 1 Corinthians 5 and 7. So the understanding and logic of the Christians during the time of Paul or the believers in Yahawashi was that Yahawashi is the Passover lamb in which was sacrificed so that we can be saved. It says uh, for the Christian, the Passover is symbolic of Yahawashi delivering those who trust in him from the slavery and penalty of sin. So once again, two salvations. One is being delivered from the slavery and penalty of sin, which if you believe on Yahawashi, you confess in him, and you've turned toward him. Basically, he's called you, and he's supping with you, and you believe on him, and that's being um, delivered from your old ways, from your old ways of life. Been brought into the newness of life. You've been renewed. The Spirit of the Lord is working with you now. That's one form of salvation. The ultimate form of salvation would be saved from thermonuclear missiles, which if you've been watching GMS, you know all about World War III. Kept during the time of Jacob's trouble, and kept during the time of the hour of temptation. So all of these things still have to play out. So many are called, but few are chosen. So you can be one of the called right now, but don't consider yourself one of the chosen until you have been delivered out of America and out of thermonuclear fire. So going back to Pesach is a symbolic. It became what started out as a holy day in which we would celebrate the time of the Lord passing over the Israelites during the time of the Exodus, turned into a time in which we would um, think upon him and understand that he is the Passover lamb, in which if we he was sacrificed. Let me read this. This is from the Death and Resurrection of Yahawashi article from Bite Size, and it says here, each year Jews celebrate the Passover festival. This is a festival which remembers the escape of the ancient Israelites from Egypt. Yahawashi and his disciples were celebrating the Passover meal. So Yahawashi kept the Passover. And this is when things changed. When he kept the Passover, that last Passover he kept before his death and resurrection. That's why the whole week is pretty much a holy day, is because not only because we were going through Egypt during that time, but during this time, Yahawashi he kept his last Passover meal, and not too long after he was crucified, hung on a tree, hung on a cross, died, and 3 days later he rose again. And so during this feast of unleavened bread, during the time of Yahushua's passing, he was slaughtered as a Passover lamb. He was slaughtered just as the Passover lamb was. His bones wasn't broken, okay, and he died and was resurrected 3 days later by the Father. And this is also during the same period of time in which we keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it says here, Yahawashi and his disciples were celebrating the Passover meal together. As this was the last meal that Yahawashi would share with his disciples, he took elements of the Passover meal. Here's the point here. He took elements of the Passover meal and made them symbols of his death. And that wasn't done before. That was never done before. And that's what was done. And that's what is remembered at Great Millstones, Passovers, Passats, wherever you are in the world. We remember Yahawashi. We remember Yahawashi. We remember Egypt because we know the original sets the tone. You wouldn't understand why Yahawashi is considered a Passover, the lamb, or Passover lamb, unless you understood the Passover. So we must it's necessary to understand the first Passover, the original, to understand what Yahawashi did. It says he took elements of the Passover meal. So while they're having a Passover, he began to take elements from there, and it says, and made them symbols of his death. He says, while they were at the table, Yahushua made a shock announcement. He said that he would be betrayed by one of his disciples, the one who dips his bread with the dish with me. dips his bread in the dish with me. The disciples were shocked and anxious and said, surely not me. Yahawashi said that it would have been better if the traitor had never been born. What did Yahawashi, what Yahawashi did next at the meal has become the most important ritual for Christians. Remember, Jews was first called Christians at Antioch. So the Christians isn't Jews, the Christians were Israelites. The Christians were Israelites first. They weren't this whole body of different nationalities and races. The Christians first, according to Acts 11 and 26, were were the disciples of the Lord were Israelites, were Jews who were being taught by Paul when he was going to these different cities and teaching, right? And that's what a lot of Christians today have an issue with Hebrew Israelites, because we teach nationality. We teach that only Israel can be saved. That's another subject. Now, it says here, what Yahawashi did next at the meal has become the most important ritual for Christians, or I'll say Hebrew Israelites, or I'll say believers of Yahawashi, as he asked that his actions be repeated. It says Yahawashi blessed the bread, broke it, and passed it around. He did the same with the wine. He explained that the bread was his body and the wine was his blood. Yahawashi's death would be the final sacrifice, enabling all people, which we understand now as revived, as taught, as learned, as educated, and true believers. All right, believers in truth. We understand that he enabled all Israelites to receive Yahweh's forgiveness. So the forgiveness coming through Yahawashi, who prophesied of his death and turned the Passover ceremony, Pesach ceremony, and Feast of Unleavened Bread into a time of understanding that he had to die in order for and be sacrificed, and he would be that final sacrifice. The sacrificial lamb in which you eat at the Passover was a representation of Yahawashi. Now, one would say, well, he just bit off of the Passover. We would say that the Passover lamb was set up in a way that in the future Yahawashi would be able to do this, and it makes sense because it was always about him anyway. See, Yahawashi said, "Behold, I come in the volume of the book; it is written of me." And so, as you reading from the time of before, they didn't understand why they had to sacrifice a lamb, not break the bones and not do that. And later on, it would turn out that Yahawashi would be that final sacrificial lamb, bones not broken, all right, a male, unblemished, and everything from the beginning represented what would to come. And there are many scriptures that talk about that. So now that we understand, see, it says here the Jewish authorities in ancient times refocused the Passover celebration on the shared meal. The result is the Seder, the set order of prayer and scripted retelling of the Exodus story that the Jews now use. We tell the Seder at the Great Millstone Passovers. We go through the story of the Exodus to bring it home, and then we also tell you why Yahawashi is that Passover lamb. It was all set up in the spirit. And we need Yahawashi now because when that death angel comes back out, it is only the believers who will be delivered from death in the times to come. When those trumpet sounds, as you know, and that death angel begins, and plagues and pestilences, famines is unleashed, and the winds is held, not refrained from being held back anymore, and well, we'll need Yahawashi again. You understand? It says the blood of the lamb is mentioned in the Passover Seder, but only in passing. So back then they only mentioned it in passing, but now it's the focus because it became understood that Yahawashi was that sacrifice. So only the difference between the so-called Jews today and Christians today, well, the Christians understand that. They believe in the New Testament, understanding the Yahawashi's role. All right, they're misguided with the name. They're misguided with who he came to save. But they do believe that the Son was sent. All right, they're misguided on how he was created and whatnot. But They do believe he was sent. And so Hebrew Israelites today that believe in the New Testament, you're supposed to be acknowledging this Passover and rehearsing this righteous act. It's still a rehearsal because Yahawashi is not keeping his act that delivers you, but it's the faith in which you have in Yahawashi and through his grace and mercy that he was sacrificed for this reason. It's understanding why he had to be sacrificed and how that links up with the Pesach and that in the Passover and how we in the practices in which we were keeping from the time of Exodus. It's how Yahweh symbolically changed that forever. All right. And so that he is the mediator now. And we go through him to reach the Father. Lord willing, this video is edifying. Until next time, Shalom. Keep the Passover. Lord willing, if you can, if you're able to, Lord willing, keep it in with this mindset that it's a day that represented. Be mindful of Yahweh and this sacrifice that he had to take in order for us to receive salvation. Lord willing, we the elect, but he had to go through that in order for us to even be here. So it's a remembrance of him. Unless you just don't believe in the New Testament, you should be celebrating the Passover in remembrance of Yahawashi, which means it'll be kept with more moderation, with more thought, with more solemnness. It will be kept in solemnity, if that's a word, solemnity, to because you're remembering that Yahawashi before his death was sweat and blood. Yahawashi before his death prayed, asked the Lord 3 times to take that cross away from him and take that cup from his mouth that he didn't have to drink. So he was pressured. He was there's not a word. He was grieved. Okay, he was bruised for our iniquities and for our sins and for our trespasses. Our trespasses against him. Isaiah 51, I believe. By his stripes we are healed. So keep that in mind as you keeping this Passover, as keeping this solemn assembly, which is a Pesach. Lord willing, this video is edifying. Till next time, Shalom.